Hey guys, it's Alex Bonham-Carter with Crowntown Headgear, and I wanted to demonstrate how I top stitch a headband. First things first, this is a Singer 3115 industrial machine. It does not have reverse, and it was made in 1926, so it's not newfangled technology by any means, but it works very well for me, and I like vintage machines. I collect and restore them, so that works out well for me. The presser foot that I've got is a 1/8 of an inch zipper foot, and then this tool here, I'll talk about this when I get to it, but it's basically just exactly what it looks like. It's just a finished tail that's been stitched closed on the cut side. So I've got the needle right over where the tag is going to go, and the reason why I do that is because there is always going to be like a knot or like a double layer of stitching where it starts and finishes, and I would prefer to conceal that by the tag. It's nothing more scientific than that. Everybody's different. Some people like to start and stop on the tail. I just like to start and stop underneath the tag because I think it looks a little bit cleaner, but excuse me, everybody's different. So let us begin. Also I wanted to say, I don't have any guides. No bolt-in guides, no magnet guides, no guides on the foot, no guides around the foot, nothing at all. I'm just steering it with my fingers and letting the machine do all of the feeding itself. The reason for that is that I've tried, I don't know, 6 or 7 different varieties of guided feet and magnet guides, and I have not been able to find one that does a better job than I can by myself. And that's not bragging. The fact is that this side is very easy because it's flat. It's a straight seam, and in this case, since it's a one-piece construction, it's just a fold, so there are no bumps or anything like that. So this side is really easy to put a guide against, because you could have a guide. If this was a guide, I could have it right here and it would work perfectly. It would feed perfectly. I could have it here and it would work perfectly and feed perfectly. The problem becomes when the headband rotates and you've got this curved side on this side. On the top side of the headband, it's a continuous curve, and it goes, it's a pretty large gradient, meaning the tails are very narrow and the forehead is very fat. And it's very difficult to find a guide that is narrow enough to handle the curves, but also wide enough to be useful on the flat side. So I just eyeball it. So let's begin. This is typically my sewing speed. I'm not in a rush. I'm not cranking out 20 and 30 headbands a day. I usually do custom work, and if I can do like 3 or 4 in a typical day, that's fine for me, because this is a advanced hobby for me. It's not my 9 to 5. So I'm just feeding it very gently. I guess I should say also that the pressure knob is about halfway. I don't have it cranked all the way down. Some people like to crank it all the way down. I prefer to keep it just tight enough to feed correctly, because I want to be able to steer the headband as needed. Now obviously that can have some drawbacks as well, but it works for me. So for the most part, I will sit with my right hand on my two fingers and sometimes my thumb of my right hand guiding the front of the headband before the needle, and then my left hand is just kind of supporting the tail. And the reason why I do that is because if you have the headband as straight in front of the needle as possible, then you have less, gravity tension working against the feed dog, so it feeds more easily. And when the fabric feeds more easily, you get straighter stitches, and you also get a more consistent stitch length, because if the feed dogs are really pulling, and the fabric is there's a lot of weight on the fabric pulling it away from the feed dogs, and the stitch length can be pretty narrow because the feed dogs are not able to get a good purchase on the fabric. But anyway, I'm just rambling now, so let's get back to it. So not too fast. That is just fine with me. Now when I get to the tail, I'll go even slower because I don't want to overshoot my, I guess, pivot point. This machine doesn't have reverse, so when I get to an area that's too narrow for a complete stitch, but too wide to not use the reverse, I would actually just lift the foot slightly, lift the needle out of the fabric, and then just position it where I want it. It's cheating, but it doesn't really show up in the finished product. So I've rotated the band, and now I'm working on the tail. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to point out an issue. The problem is that the weight of the presser bar, which is the rod that the presser foot is attached to, the weight of it is actually centered on the back side of the foot. What that means is that all of the weight is pressing the foot against the feed dogs and against the throat plate, but the fabric is up here. So that means if I start to stitch, then only this little section right here of the presser foot is touching the fabric. So it doesn't have a good grip on it. So as the feed dogs are pulling it back and the presser foot is lifting, it's still not lifting enough to clear where the fabric needs to be. So it's almost like it's climbing a hill. So in order to counteract that, enter my tail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the foot. I'm going to put the tail like so. And now the presser foot is flat. It's not necessarily gripping the front any better, but it is flat. So it's not going to have to rise over a mountain of fabric. It's just going to continue straight. Not that the presser foot is moving at all. Obviously it just goes up and down. But you can buy these things on Amazon. They are called hump jumpers. They're made of plastic. They're about $15. Or you can just make one yourself if all you're doing is sewing the same variety of headband, which is what this machine is for. So since I'm not doing a variety of different operations with this machine, I'm only doing a couple of things. Sometimes I'll do tags on this machine, and sometimes I'll just do headbands, but no wraps, no mesh, no problems. So this is really all I need, because this will replicate the thickness of a 2-piece on this side and a 1-piece on this side. Anyway, rambling again, let's go. So move that out of the way so it doesn't get on the floor. Now this is the issue where a machine that has reverse would be convenient, because I have to kind of imagine where a good spot to start this top side of the headband would be. So I put the needle in where I think it's going to go. Put the needle down, and would you look at that? It is very good. This one I didn't, this top side here I didn't have to use the tail on, because there was enough of the fabric underneath the presser foot so it could actually hold it tight against the feed dogs. This is a drop feed machine, just a standard straight stitch drop feed machine. That means that the presser foot just goes up and down, and all of the fabric movement is because of the feed dogs underneath. It's not a walking foot, it doesn't have a compound feed, anything like that. Let's move that out of the way. So I have a very loose grip on the fabric. I do that because I want the machine to do all of the work. I don't want to have to white knuckle the fabric under the machine, because when you put too much finger force onto the fabric, it will distort the length of the stitches and how straight they are. So slow stitching and a very light touch. And then I'm approaching the forehead curve, so I'll go a little bit slower because I don't want to pierce the towel, and I also want to keep the lines as straight as I can get. And I'm just kind of using my hand to pivot the fabric. With my right hand, I'm supporting the tail of the headband. About this point, I want to make sure that I'm not stitching over the thread tails from the start, and I am not. Now here is obviously where my tail opening is when I made the headband in the first place. So I'm going to, as it gets a little bit closer to the needle, I'm going to hold it together with my fingers. Sometimes in ye olde days I'll use clips or pins to hold it closed, but then you have a risk of distorting the fabric when you're pulling out the pins. So I just use my fingers. And this tail typically does not need my little hump jumper denim lift, because again, I will show you. So I've got it where I want it to be. I'm going to lift the foot, rotate the fabric, and that is over half of the presser foot over the top of the edge of the fabric, so it's got plenty of grip, so I won't worry at all about not being able to give me good stitches on this edge. The points, however, are going to look pretty terrible, so we're going to use the denim tail scrap on that. Whoops. So straighten out the tail, arrange it where I'll want to start sewing, and you can see how much of the foot is off the fabric, so I'm going to use the low side, and then you will see that the foot is pretty much straight, which is exactly what we want it to be. And it feeds with almost no hesitation whatsoever. How does the tail look? It looks pretty good. It's a little squeezed at the very edge, but no one will notice that, and if they do, I will say it's a handmade item. And the imperfections are part of the process. I'm just kidding. It's still better than nearly every headband I've seen that comes out of Pakistan, so I'm not that worried about it. Whoops. Let's advance it so the needle is in. Okay, so now we are getting close to the starting point, so I'm going to pull my thread tails out because I don't want to stitch over them. So as I'm getting closer, I keep the needle in and I flip the headband over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tug on the underside tail, and that is going to pull a loop from the top of the thread. I don't want to get into the science, but basically how a sewing machine works is that there is a bobbin underneath that is the underside of the stitch, and then you've got the needle thread, which is feeding from the cone on the top. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling the needle thread through to the underside, so both tails are on the back, and then I'm going to stitch until I get to one stitch past where I started, and then I'm going to stop, lift it so the take-up lever will allow me to extract the headband, and I'm going to pull it out with good and plenty of tail. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it underneath the presser foot like so you can actually see what I'm doing. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing with the end tails that I did with the beginning. That is, I'm going to tug on the back side, pulling a loop, and then I'm going to use my very specialized tool called a paper clip. I'm going to use that to pull that loop through. So now all of the tails are on the back side of the headband. And then it's as easy as this. Tie once, tie twice, and let's go for a third knot just for good luck. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off. Now if this was the tag, I would burn the edge of the stitches, but as I'm going to tag this headband, there's no tag yet, the tag stitches are actually going to lock the top stitches down, and then I'm going to burn the edge of the tag stitches when I pull them through. So it's not magic, but it does take practice. It's like anything. The tail stitch looks straight to me, and you can see that I did a pretty good job for not having a guide. I take it pretty seriously, so I'm pretty pleased with that. Anyway, reach out with questions if you have any, and I'll leave you guys with that.